Welcome back to another episode of the Jessica Ella podcast. I am your host, Jessica Ella. Today is another part of the How I Healed series, and we're going to be talking about mistaking my trauma for my purpose. And I know that so many women who follow me who have moved into the healing industry or some form of therapy or social work, people who look after other people have mistaken their pain and their trauma for their purpose. So we're going to be unpacking that in today's episode. I remember the moment where I realized that I had been unconsciously using my trauma as my purpose and also as a way to feel alive. I was at a 2-day intensive workshop training with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is the author of The Body Keeps the Score, which is an amazing book on trauma. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it before. And I was at his intensive 2-day training, and there were so many things that I learned over that 2 days. But one thing that just hit me and really stuck with me was that he said that a person who has been through a lot of trauma would have what he would call a traumatized brain, and the way that their brain functions is different to the way that other people who haven't been through a lot of trauma, the way that their brain functions. And he said the traumatized brain only feels alive when they are reliving their trauma. And I started to realize in that exact moment that by telling my story, by working with women with sexual trauma, with very similar histories to mine, I was reliving my trauma and the feelings of trauma through them and through their stories, but also through me retelling my story over and over. And it was making me feel so good. It was making me feel so alive and on feeling like I was in line with my purpose. But actually at the same time, I was hitting burnout. I was constantly actually triggered into fight or flight. I was not regulated. I was rushing through the day, and it felt exciting, but at the same time, it felt very dysregulating. And I started to realize in that moment, I'd gone to this 2-day trauma training to learn more, to help my clients and to, incorporate into my certification. And all of a sudden I left thinking, I actually can't work with this anymore. I actually need to take a break because I need to teach my brain how to feel alive without reliving panic, pain, suffering. I need to learn how to feel alive without moving into fight or flight or sympathetic activation of my nervous system, without getting into that excited but chaotic state. And it was a good 12 months where I actually stopped working with anybody who had a similar history to me. I shared 1/10 of the amount of the content that I share now, and I took a really big step back to live 12 months where my trauma didn't have anything to do with my life, where I actually just got to enjoy life. And my words for those years were fun. My word for those years was aliveness. It was joy. It was, what can I do to make life even more fun, even more exciting? And I started to rewire my brain to find this feeling of aliveness in other things outside of trauma. And it was a really hard thing to do. When you've been through that much trauma and then you've moved into it as a career, it actually is really addictive to keep hearing it, to keep in that world, to keep living it, to keep experiencing it, to keep working with it. It's really addictive. And there were so many times where, like an addiction, I felt like I just need to see some of these clients. Like I just felt drawn to wanting to do it because I was wanting to trigger myself to feel that excitement, that aliveness feeling. And there was a period where I did feel like I wasn't living my life's purpose, and like what am I doing with myself, and I'm out of alignment, and I was dissociated. But really, I needed that 12 months of that time off to actually be able to find this feeling of aliveness somewhere else and to heal at an even deeper level before I could come back. And I did come back, And now it doesn't give me the same feeling that it used to. It's healthy, and it's not this exciting, activated, triggered feeling. It's just like, that was a really good session. We made some really good progress. It's very calm. It's very centered. And when I feel the most alive and excited is when I'm doing things with my family, or when I'm, jumping into the ocean, like doing things that are good for me. So I learned how to actually reprogram and shift this feeling that like my purpose was that pain, and to keep living through that pain. And I think this happens with a lot of people in advocacy too. There's people who they unconsciously feel that their pain is their purpose, in that what happened to them means that they tell the world this certain message. And you see it time and time again with people who stand up and they make these really powerful emotional speeches about what happened to them and why the world needs to change. But when I see those people, I see the anger and I see the pain, and I see that it's very much still there. And I believe that there is a part of us that keeps us, we want to keep ourselves stuck. We want to keep ourselves in that pain and that suffering and that trauma, because we're using it. We're using it for greater good. But those people I know, and I've experienced and I've seen over the years, they struggle time and time again with burnout, with not wanting to talk about that mission anymore, or with just their mental health going backwards time and time again, because I don't think that we're meant to use our pain like that. I think there are a lot of examples of people that use pain. Some of the most successful and, well-known athletes, like in Ironman and in these extreme sports, are people that have actually come from traumatic backgrounds, and they're actually used to punishing themselves, and they're actually used to being punished and physically harmed, that they're able to sort of dissociate and push themselves beyond what is a natural human limit. And yes, they achieve great things, but at some point, the reason why they're doing that, it actually catches up with them. So I don't believe that we can use our pain as our purpose. I believe that we can use our healing as our purpose. I had to heal to then come back and say, this is how you heal. This is how you move forward. This is how you actually change your life. This is how you actually create a version of yourself that doesn't experience all that pain and suffering anymore. But if the pain and the suffering gives the person a benefit, and they're benefiting from staying in that pain and suffering, they're not going to let it go. I see it on Instagram all the time with accounts that, their message is that they're preaching, you can never heal from complex trauma. You can never heal from it. You just have to learn how to live with it. And they're educating people on like, this is how you tell the people in your life what it's like to live with complex trauma. And this is how you get people to basically bend around you to make your life more comfortable, because there's some things that can never be healed, in bunny rabbit quotation marks, some things that can never be healed. But the reality is that's what they believe, because that's what they experience, because they're using their pain for their purpose, and their pain is an essential part of their message. I know artists, like musical artists, who say that they don't want to work on their trauma because it makes them write the most emotional music. They need to keep the pain there to remember the heartbreak, to write the most beautiful songs. So they use their pain for that purpose. But a lot of them end up on drugs, overdosing. A lot of them end up not actually being able to keep a container on that pain. It takes over. And all of a sudden, it's not their purpose anymore. It's taking over their whole life. I first realized that I was addicted to the struggle and to the feeling of chaos and going around in circles and creating drama and chaos and kind of triggering myself when I decided to take a break from the healing work. So not just from healing other people, even prior to going to that workshop and realizing that and having that break, I'd had a 3-month break a year before where I realized that I was constantly in this like self-help cycle where I was always like digging into deeper layers, and I was always trying to uncover more pain and more suffering and more traumas. And I was reading these books that were quite intense of other people's trauma stories that were kind of bringing up more and more of my own trauma. And yes, there was a level of that I needed to do that. But there also became a point where I had actually healed a lot of the memories that I had at the time, but I was just digging and digging, trying to keep myself in that struggle cycle, trying to uncover as much as I could. And I decided that it was time for me to stop doing the work just for 3 months, where I wasn't allowed to work on myself, work on my healing. I wasn't allowed to pick up and read a self-help book. And in that period, I realized just how much I was very much addicted to healing. I was very much addicted to the process of uncovering and feeling that pain. And then I guess as well, when I moved into sort of more of the like somatics and breath work, I became quite addicted to the intensity of those emotions. And when I would have a breathwork session or a somatics session where I didn't feel a lot of emotions come up, I would think that the session was unsuccessful because I was like, but I didn't scream or cry or feel like I wanted to shout. Like, so it mustn't have worked. And I realized that I had created this perception of healing that it has to be really hard and intense and traumatic for it to actually work, when in actual fact, there is a small truth to that, in that you can't really do trauma healing work on something that was horrific without it feeling horrific going back into it. But there definitely are ways that we can lessen that, and there are ways that we can manage that that aren't as intense as some therapists out there would like to make that session for you. So I started to realize that I was addicted to healing. I was addicted to trauma. I was addicted to hearing other people's trauma, listening to podcasts, reading books about other people with the same trauma as me. And whilst there was a level of understanding and educating myself, there was also a period where it was just like, this is not actually going to help me create the version of myself who doesn't have anything to do with her trauma anymore. And to be honest, it was a really hard thing to come back from. After I spent 12 months not speaking about my trauma and just speaking, I spoke about healing in general. I just spoke about trauma in general. I just spoke about, my relationship, and I spoke about like how we heal and how we rise into the most powerful version of ourselves. And I didn't really tell my trauma story for a good 12 months. And it felt liberating. It felt like, I didn't need to say it anymore because that wasn't who I was anymore, and I didn't have anything to do with it, and it felt really good. But then I started to realize that I'd leaned really far into the opposite direction where I just didn't want to talk about it at all. And so now I found this middle ground where I want to focus on the healing and the positive and, what we can do and that we can heal. But part of that is actually talking about where I've come from, because people don't know that you're speaking from truth and that you're speaking from very real personal experience unless you share that. So I find this time and time again on social media where people say like, you post something and they're like, what's the story here? And where was this person? Where was that person? And what is, and they want to know all the information. And I think that is human nature. People want to know who they're hearing from. So I found this balance where I can speak about it now, but it's not coming from a place of hurt and pain and anger and rage. I can speak about it from a place of this is very matter of fact. This is how it was. This is what happened, but this is where I am now, and this is where you can be too. I feel like if you audited your Instagram account, you can really see who's healed and who's not based off the messaging that they're giving you. If they're talking constantly about abusers of this and abusers of that, and, talking about labeling people as narcissistic and toxic and abusive, and they're constantly talking about that, you can see that they're still stuck in the pain. And I don't know about you, but I don't really want advice from anybody who's still stuck in the pain. I want advice from somebody who's moved out the other side and can talk about it with no emotion coming up. Someone asked me the other day in a chat box, do you really, truly not have emotion come up when you speak about all those horrific things that happened? Like, how is that possible? I was like, because I did a lot of work on it. And yes, I can speak about it and nothing happens in my body. I don't get triggered. I used to not even realize, I used to dissociate and tell the story. I would fully leave my body to tell the story. And when I would have to come back in days later I'd be panicked and shaky, and I'd realize that, that podcast that I'd spoken on or whatever had definitely brought the trauma back up and had triggered me. But I actually attribute a lot of that to the fact that there was a memory there where I had been punished for speaking up that was kind of driving this fear of every time I spoke up on a podcast, it was like, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. So it felt like once I'd healed that memory, it was really easy to share after that. But that is how it should be. You should heal to the point where you can tell your story with nothing happening in your body, because it doesn't even feel like it happened to you. It feels like a distant memory. And you're using it for context for people that are still there to show them where they can get to. I've absolutely felt like life only had meaning when I was surviving something, fighting something, or when something was happening. And I didn't realize that those big things that were happening in my life constantly over and over were happening because I was expecting it. I was always ready for the next big thing to hit. I was always ready for the next worst case scenario. And it becomes addictive because you start to think that if you're not ready and you're not on edge and something big isn't happening, you almost don't know how to exist in the calm. It's like the eye of the storm. It feels like you're in the eye of the storm, and maybe you're not actually in the eye of the storm, but it feels like you are, and it feels like it's going to hit you at any moment. And what I started to learn was that I believed truly that if I wasn't in fight or flight and I wasn't making drama or focusing on the negative or panicking about something, that I felt unsafe and unprotected. It was like something could come for me at any moment and I wouldn't be ready for it if I was relaxed. It was like relaxing and not focusing on the bad felt so unsafe because I wasn't going to be ready for anything at any moment. And we get addicted to fight or flight and the pain and the suffering and the struggling because it's like our brain and body's way of saying, like, keep on edge, because we have evidence here that something bad always happens. So you've got to be ready. Like, you've got to be ready just in case, because otherwise something really bad could happen. But in actual fact, really bad things kept happening because I was almost creating them, expecting them, looking for them. And, some of those things were getting Lyme disease, was having molar pregnancies, or a molar pregnancy. And my body responding to the constant physical, elements of stress, like high cortisol and a weakened nervous system and no digestive function. And, these were the things that were happening in my body that were also causing health issues. And then, there was also this part of me that had only ever experienced life one way. So I only assumed that it was going to be one way. So I would assume the worst of people. And because I assumed the worst of people, I unconsciously chose people to be in my life who were going to do the worst by me, because that's what I knew and that's what I expected, and that was the caliber of person that I would allow into my life. And so time and time again, I was proving myself right. Oh, see, this person's abused me again. Oh, that friend's done something toxic. Oh, this person. And it would just be confirmation constantly of what I believed. And you start to think that everyone is like that. Everyone in the world is like that, because you've got so many examples of so many different people, when in reality, you're meeting the same person, the same type of person in a different skin time and time again, because you're unconsciously attracted to or magnetized to that person. Because your brain's job is to take what you believe and to make that your reality. So your brain's not going to be like, oh, that's a really nice, kind, friendly person over there, we should be friends with them. It's not going to be interested in that person because it doesn't believe that people are nice and kind and happy and truthful. It believes that people are toxic and evil and untrustworthy. So it's going to be looking for those people. Your brain doesn't even notice the other people. And if it does, you think, oh, like, they're strange, they're weird, they're not my person. We push them away, we ignore them. So your brain's just going to be unconsciously looking for what you believe to be true and it's just going to seek that out, and it's going to find those people, and then it's going to notice the toxic, abusive, untruthful things that they're saying and doing, and it's just going to keep saying, see, I told you everyone's like that. And the more examples you get and the longer you play this pattern, the more deeply ingrained it becomes. I've worked with women in their 60s and 70s, and it's like, it's not like it's a belief anymore. It's not like I can say, can you see how you believe that people are unsafe and that you can't trust people? And they're like, it's not a belief, it's true. It's 100% true. And I'm like, but what if I changed that belief? And we shifted this belief to people are truthful and you can trust people and people are supportive and loving and there are so many good people in the world. What if I could shift that and you could start to meet and experience those people and change and shift that belief? And they're like, nah, there's no one in the world like that. I've met a lot of people. There's no one in the world like that. This is what our brain does. It's like we're like hyper focused, hyper zoomed in on what we believe to be true, that we actually don't realize that there's this whole other world out there of different types of people, experiences, the amount of times that people tell me something's not possible. And then you change their belief systems and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I figured out a way to make it possible. That the possibility was always there. Their brain just could not see it. And it's one of those things that a lot of people will say, you know, you'll tell someone, a friend will say something and you'll be like, oh, you know, that's just your perception. Like you should try this healing thing or you should try that. And it's just like in one ear and out the other. They're like, oh yeah, okay. But it doesn't line up with what they believe. And so they don't even register that you've said it. They don't take it on. They don't listen to your advice because their brain is designed to filter that information for what they already believe to be true. So we're so biased, just like our chat GPT, just like Google, just like our algorithm on Instagram. Our brain is biased. It's only looking for what we already believe to be true. It can't see the outside stuff. It just sees this is what's true and this is what I'm going to experience over and over. So all of a sudden you change the subconscious beliefs and you start to see something different and you start to then experience something different. And then you start to get evidence that this new belief is true. And then you start to believe that new belief more and more, the more experiences that you get where you're like, oh, this person just handed my wallet into the police station. People are good. People are truthful. You start to get more experiences and you start to believe these new beliefs. I think the obsession that we have with focusing on the bad and focusing on the negative beliefs and the pain and the suffering, especially now in today's society, is that we were so far the other way for so long that we've kind of swung really far into the opposite. And this is what happens with everything in life, in society, in human beings. We go from one side and we swing really far to the opposite, and eventually we find some kind of common middle ground. And I call this leaning into the opposite. So we've come from a generations of just don't worry about it. Someone's like, oh, I've got a lot of trauma. Just don't worry about it. That happened in the past. Just forget about it. Positive thinking, positive mindset. And we've gone from like spirituality and bypassing and completely ignoring our emotions and ignoring our pain and suffering. And this mentality of like, it's all good. It's all good. Don't worry. It's all good. Just sweep it under the rug. Just forget about that. Just don't talk about it. No one wants to hear about your suffering. No one wants to hear about your pain. Nobody cares. And we've gone from that being the mentality for decades. And within a very short few years, we've gone into, you know, in Australia, like it's okay not to be okay. And your pain is relevant and your suffering is relevant. And everybody has trauma and everybody has anxiety and everybody is suffering. And it's probably true to a degree because we've pushed it down for so long. Through generations after generation, we've passed down that pain and passed down that suffering. And we've passed it down because it's uncomfortable and we don't want to look at it. But now we've got all of these people that are like, look at it, focus on it, feel it, experience it, see it, live in it. And we've got all of these people now that are like, you can't move past it. It's always going to be there because they've experienced that it's always been there. And we've got these people that are like, you've got to feel the pain. You've got to go into the pain over and over and over again. And yes, that's true, but you've also got to find this happy medium where you go into the pain and the suffering when it arises. You know, when something bad happens, or you have a week where you're feeling really off, really sad, really angry, you can self-inquire and go, okay, where's this coming from? Why am I feeling this? But we go into it ideally with this perspective of solving. Like, okay, where does this come from so that I can uncover it and fix it and heal it and move it, not just sit in it for the rest of my life, not just live here where the suffering and the pain is and just feel it over and over and over again. Let's find the root cause so we can shift it, and then we can stay in this middle ground where we're just living our life and we're just enjoying life, and we're like get to be a human who experiences all of these beautiful experiences. But if that some more of that pain comes up, we look at it again, we find the root cause, we shift it, and then we move on with our life again. We're struggling at the moment to find this middle ground. We're struggling to find this middle ground between the people who still say, just get over it, and the people who say sit in it and feel it, and your pain is valid and it's okay if you're suffering for the rest of your life. It's actually not okay if you're suffering for the rest of your life. It's actually really sad if you suffer for the rest of your life, because there's actually fucking things you can do to help it. You don't have to suffer for the rest of your life. That's a choice now, because what happened to you happened and we can't change that. But what you're going to do with it is up to you. So you can choose to ignore it and it will resurface in its own way, or you can choose to look at it and feel it and explore it and heal it and uncover it, or you can choose to sit in it and choose to be the victim and choose to complain about it and feel it and get lower and lower for the rest of your life and never do anything about it. But for me, there was never an option. It was always, we're going to face it, we're going to uncover the bottom cause of it, and we're going to heal it. But going into that part of life was quite addictive, as I mentioned. And so I had to really consciously get to this period where I moved myself out of analyzing and dissecting everything I did. Like, why am I thinking that? Where does that come from? What belief is that? Is this a trauma? Is this my trauma? Like, where's this coming from? Constantly in my head, and, oh, I'm a bit sad today. Why am I sad? Where's that coming from? Is there another memory? Like, constantly obsessing. I had got to a point where it was like, that's actually just an addiction now. I'm pretty sure I'm fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just assume that the best. I'm going to assume that I'm fine. And if something really big wants to be seen, it'll be seen. So I'm going to focus now on fun, on joy, on passion, on excitement. And so I started writing lists of like, what does fun even look like? Because when you've been suffering for your entire life, fun and play just don't exist. You don't even know what you like. You don't even know what it feels like to feel good without trauma. The only feel good you know is when you're just like chaotic in fight or flight because you've just heard something really fucked up, like, and you're like, you know, in this fight or flight activation. Like, you don't actually know what it feels like to feel excited for positive and good things. So I started to write lists, and I started to think about what my inner child would want to do, what my inner teenager would want to do. And I started to think about what's fun for me. And I spent like a good 2 years with my word as fun. And 12 months of it, I wasn't allowed to work on myself, and 12 months of it I was, but I still now have integrated that into my life. And so it's like, what feels good today? What feels like fun? And trying new experiences and focusing on actually living my life, not just healing, because it's very difficult to live your life and feel alive and enjoy life when you're constantly dredging up old pain. So we've got to find that balance in between. And this is what I talk about, and this is why there are 5 stages in Trigger to Thriving, because this, you know, stage 4 and 5, like reclaim your power and then rise into flow. There is a shift there between, you know, reclaiming your power, reclaiming this powerful, loving, free version of yourself, but then also in that stage 5, rise into flow, tapping out of doing the work, tapping out of the healing and the addiction and the intensity of it all, and moving into the flow of life. And I created in that way because I noticed that so many people got stuck at that point. They got stuck at that addiction to the healing. So it's a really good tool, even if you've worked through a lot of your trauma, to do just like number 4 and number 5, which is reclaim your power and rise into flow, to get you to that next level. Because if you're kind of sitting there thinking, I actually don't even know how to enjoy myself, I've been doing the healing work for so long, I'm ready to go into that stage. There's a method, there's techniques, there's tools, there's everything in there for you to move into that stage. There were so many times in my life, and there still are sometimes, where I feel guilty for being happy or being at peace. It's one of the biggest things that I struggle with, because I'm constantly surrounded by people who are struggling. I'm constantly hearing people's stories, I don't work so much now with one-on-one clients, but I train and mentor people. So my students come in and they tell me their client stories, and I'm surrounded by people who, whether it's that their businesses aren't taking off, or they're not earning as much money as me, or they're not able to look after themselves, or they've got low self-worth, or like they're just struggling. There is an empathetic part of me that feels guilty for other people suffering and struggling. There is an empathetic part of me that I've really had to train to believe that if they wanted to, they could, because I always, perceived people as helpless, because I perceived myself as helpless at times. It was like, well, they don't have a choice and they're really struggling and I owe it to them, and I feel guilty that I'm like putting out this content where my life is so good and their life is shit and they're struggling like that. I feel so bad for that. And I actually was tested on that this morning. I had a lady write on one of my Instagram posts, and she said, I love that you have healed, but maybe you should be more realistic and share the fact that trauma doesn't ever fully go away, and that it does still affect your life in little ways day to day. That would be more realistic. And I was like, maybe that's more realistic for you, but that's not more realistic for me, and it's not what I want to believe. Yeah, I have days where I feel crappy, or where I'm snappy at my partner, or where I'm like, about to get my period and I'm just feeling a bit emotional, or, I have these like normal human emotions, but I don't necessarily see them and go, oh, this is my trauma. This is my trauma. I just think every human has normal human emotions, and that's normal. And so I said something along the lines to this lady of like, that I actually do not believe that the trauma is affecting me anymore. I believe that I'm able to be level-headed and think straight, and I'm able to, don't get easily triggered. And if I am triggered, I'm very good at managing it very quickly, and I can regulate myself, and I have normal human emotions, but I don't attribute them to my trauma. And it just reminded me of the fact that people who are suffering and struggling often, they don't want to see that you're doing well, and they don't want to know about that, because it's challenging themselves. It's challenging their perception of what's possible for them. And I always take this as, an opportunity for them to go deeper. So asking them, could you challenge that belief? Could you challenge that belief that trauma will always be there? Because I don't believe that anymore. And I think I said something along these lines to this lady. So yeah, I think there's definitely still guilt there sometimes around being in a really good place, my business taking off, like being, having like publicity opportunities and podcast opportunities and earning more money than I've ever earned and things like that. But I just remind myself of how much hard work I put in over the last 15 years to get this. And that if other people really wanted to put in that hard work for 15 years, they could too. But I've never stopped. This is my 4th or 5th business. I've sacrificed time and energy, and I feel like I'm defeated, and I'm like, oh, I don't get this and I can't understand this. And I wake up the next day and I'm like, all right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to overcome it? Like, even if I have a day where something beats me, I get up and I try again. And I think that people do have the opportunity to do that. It's difficult to pull yourself out of that, but we do all have the opportunity to do that. So I remind myself not to feel guilty, because everybody does have a choice when it comes to their healing. There was a period where I spent a lot of time working on my body, because I would unconsciously just go into fight or flight at the most randomest of times. My body was fighting so hard for me to stay in the struggle and the pain and the suffering that I had to detach from my thoughts and from reason, and looking into the reason of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And I had to just focus on my body. And I would be anxious, and I would go into a panic, and my whole body would just, heart would start racing and my hands would shake. And I still do this sometimes. It's very, very few and far between, but I will have moments like rushes of panic. And what I did then and what I do now is I actually approach it with a little bit of like curiosity and humor. So I would be like, oh, okay, body. Thanks for just randomly making me go into a panic, but actually everything's okay. I know that you're just trying to like set me back and put me into this chaotic state because that's where we're used to living. But actually I want to do it a bit different this time. And then I'll regulate myself using regulation tools. Again, if you haven't done Triggered to Thriving, there are plenty of regulation tools in there that instantly reset your nervous system. And I will just reset my nervous system, and I will keep doing that until this emotion shifts, or this panic feeling shifts. But my body would constantly try to pull me back into a panic, and I had to really remove myself from that narrative and go, this is just what I'm used to. My body is used to doing this cycle, and the only way to break it is to keep doing these regulation tools so that my body can start to learn how to exist in this like calm flow state place. And it felt really uncomfortable, because if you think about it, I went from fight or flight and being hyper focused into every single thing that was happening a million miles an hour and distracted by constant stream of thoughts, multiple streams of thoughts, and doing, to shutting down and moving into dissociation, where I was left my body. I was in the dreamlike state. I couldn't put a sentence together. I was just kind of floating through life like I was in a dream. It felt very strange for me for a long period of time to actually be in my body and to be like aware of what was happening around me and not overthinking, but not checked out. It felt very strange. And there was parts of me I could feel, these little parts of me that were like, this is going to sound so funny, but there's like my brain would be like, you should do this really fucked up thing. Like you should start a fight with this person, or you should post this really intense thing on Instagram, or you should do this thing. Like my brain would think of things that I could do to blow up my life and to bring myself back into fight or flight, to create some struggle, to create some problems, to create some pain. And I had to get really good at noticing those thoughts and going, ooh, my body's doing this and my brain's trying to I used to say it was like wanting to light my life on fire. Like there was this feeling of like, ooh, I'm feeling like I want to light my life on fire. Let's just stay in the calm, regulate ourselves, notice that we're wanting to do that, and just take one step forward and not do that. And over time, I got used to existing in the calm, in the flow of life. And every now and then there's a little part of my brain that's like, let's fuck shit up. Let's fuck everything up. Let's burn it all to the ground and just run away and, have these random intense thoughts. Because if you think about it, it's been doing that for 35 years and from a very young age. And so it's used to behaving a certain way, but now I kind of find it funny. Like I'll tell Gav, I'll be like, this is what my brain said today. My brain told me that I should just randomly break up with you and run away, take my kids and run to a different state. And we laugh about it because it's like, I know that that's not me. It's a conditioned response, but you have to have a high level of self-awareness to realize when you're doing that. So maybe start to think about when you've done that in the past, when you've started fights or you've done something drastic to pull yourself back into fight or flight, to light your life on fire when it didn't necessarily have to happen. And the more self-aware you can be around what those patterns are and what it is that you do, or, sort of default towards as you're messing everything up, you can start to become more aware and notice, I'm doing that thing again. We don't need to light our lives on fire. We can regulate, we can stay here, we can stay in our body, we can stay in the flow and just move forward. And honestly, when it comes up is always when you're about to up level, or when you're about to like reach a new version or stage of your life, or, version of yourself. It's always when it's like, I'm about to like make a big investment or speak on a bigger publication than what I've spoken on before, or I feel this like uneasy, out of control feeling, but in a good way. Those patterns will come up to be like, abort mission, jump, get out, mess everything up, because it's like this self-sabotage. And it's because there's an old version of me that needs to die before I can step into this new version. And I think that that's now when a lot of the time we will self-sabotage the most intensely when we're almost about to step into something that is exactly what we desired, wanted, and all of a sudden you're saying, I don't want that thing anymore, and you're pulling yourself away from it. So we often will pull ourselves back when we're about to step into an even bigger, better version of ourselves. Wake up call that made me realize that peace could feel like purpose too was actually my boys. And I have 2 boys. They are 7 and 9, River and Banjo. And I think that I realized for as long as I played that pattern of being in fight or flight and dissociation, I was never actually able to be present with them. I was never actually able to hold their emotions, but also experience their childhood with them and be a part of that childhood, because I was rushing through it or I was zoned out and checked out from it. And I think that learning how to be in regulation and learning how to be in the flow with them meant that I was actually able to experience their childhood with them. And I often say to people, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them first. Do it for the people you love. If you don't have that self-worth to do the healing work for you, do it for them, because I can guarantee, especially as a mum, you'll look back and wish that you had of. You'll look back and wish that you didn't miss those years. And there are plenty of those early years with them where I was completely dissociated or having a nervous breakdown where I don't remember anything. I've got photos and videos, but I have no feeling or memory of those years. And I think that for me was a big pivotal moment where it was like, I'm not going to waste one more year of flicking between these 2, extreme states. I want to remember it. I want to feel it. I want to experience it. I want to make the most of these years that I have with them. When I was stuck in this fight or flight dissociative states, success and like the meaning of life to me was to be successful. And to be successful looked like running a business, earning a certain amount of money, kind of looking a certain way from the outside, having a big, beautiful house and a hot husband and cute kids, and like this poster book of like what society said you have to have your life to look like. And, some things, they just didn't actually feel like what my soul wanted, because to me, what success was how you felt. It's not about what it looked like from the outside. And I think that was the biggest shift, was from what life looked like on the outside to what it felt like. And now for me, success is having people that you love and that you love, doing things, creating experiences with those people and having the freedom and the ability to have those experiences. So yes, money does come into play, because if I want to take my kids traveling, I need a certain amount of money to take my kids traveling and to give them these experiences that I'm dreaming of for them. But it's more about what it feels like. It's more about, I actually read some journal prompts the other day. I actually read my journal the other day from last year. And it was when I was in this like really intense period of business. And I remember I read it, and what I had written was, if I had to continue running my business the way that I'm running it, and then it was like ... I wouldn't want to live. And that was like a really big moment for me, because it was like, if I had to keep running my business, working the amount of hours that I'm working and the amount of stress that I have around my business and what I'm putting into it, I would actually rather die than do that. So I was like, okay, something's got to change here. So I realized that like my version of success, yes, while there are like things that I'm manifesting and there's the house of our dreams and the holidays of our dreams and all the things of our dreams, while I'm manifesting that, it's like what actually is the most important is that I feel a certain way every single day in that process. What's most important is that I feel loved and loving towards my partner, and I feel connected and we're happy and laughing, and that my kids are happy and laughing, and that we're spending quality time together, and that I'm actually present in life. I'm not just surviving. I'm not just, quickly packing their lunches and shoving them off to school and running in and out the door and rushing everywhere. And yes, sometimes those days still happen, but most of the time, able to actually enjoy the time that I've got with the people that I love. That to me now is success. If you get to the end of your life and you are present and you are loving, and to me now success as well is like, how much do you have to give back? Like, how much can you actually give and help other people in your life? It's not just like, I want to earn X amount because I want to buy a fucking Prada handbag. I want to I want a new Porsche. It's like, how many people's lives can I impact, but in a way that isn't detrimental to my own health? Key word, isn't detrimental to my own health, because my mission used to be, how many people's lives can I impact? How many people can I save? How many people can I heal their trauma and completely change their life? While that is past 1,000 people now, I did it to my own detriment. I did it when I was tired and when I was run down and when I felt like I was suffocating, and I did it on weekends and nights and I wasn't sleeping and my health was deteriorating. I did it by sacrificing my body and myself and my needs. Now it's like, how can I make the biggest impact on people without sacrificing that much of myself, without, giving from a place of, I've got to give, I've got enough to give, not from, I need to help all of these people, doesn't matter about me, doesn't matter about what I need, doesn't matter if I'm struggling, I have to help them first. And that's that shift again. If you haven't listened to the self-worth episode, definitely have a listen to that one, because that was the shift of self-worth of like, actually I matter too, and actually I need to look after myself, and then from that place I'll have more to give. And you actually do ironically have more to give, and I've been able to help more people by having the brain space to think of ways to help more people, like this podcast. I can only help one person each hour, but if I sit here and record this podcast for 1 hour, I could help, I help thousands of people that listen to it. So I'm actually able to help more people now by having this brain space, or a different brain space of what that looks like. So that was probably one of the biggest shifts for me, is going from self-sacrificing to looking after myself, but still coming from this perspective of, how do I help as many people as humanly possible? Because that is the desire, that is the mission. For me, that's what the purpose is now. I used to think that I was this person that would, as other people that I've mentioned on Instagram that I follow, and I do love them, but I used to think that I was this person that would suffer alongside everybody, that would kind of always understand their pain because I was in it with them. I'll help you through this. You're struggling today. I'll help you, even though I'm tired and run down. Like, let's do this together. We're in it together. And I would take on their pain and suffering as my own, and I would help them because I felt like I needed to. Whereas doing this belief work, I've been able to shift into, from this, I'm in it with you, to I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to lead the way. And feeling like you're a leader, and like you doing that belief work around even believing that I could be a leader, even believing that that's possible for me. But it also took me out of that struggle. It took me out of that pain. And it was like, I'm going to show you what's possible. One of my things that I've written in so many of my journals is, I am the example. I want to be the example. I want to show you, I want to be the roadmap, the guide, I want to show people how good it can get. Like there's healing from trauma where you don't have flashbacks and like life's kind of good. And then there's like going from here, which is, trauma and suffering and things that most people can't imagine, to going all the way over here, which is this life beyond your dreams. I don't want to go through all of that to create like a mediocre life. I want it to be magic. I want to have the best relationship, and I want to have the best relationship with my kids and the best sex and the most money possible and the most travel and the most, I want it to be amazing. And I want to show people that it can be amazing, not just that you heal it and you settle. You keep pushing and you create magic and you get those things that most people don't ever get because they kind of just settle because they maybe haven't even had that contrast of so much pain and suffering. But when you've had so much pain and suffering, it's like, no, I don't want it to be like that. I want to be the opposite. And so that's my mission now is to shift from I'm in it with you to I'm going to show you how. I'm the example. I know how to do it. Follow me. The hardest part about letting go of this old identity and letting go of chaos and being in it with them was that chaos felt exciting. There's a really fine line between anxiety and excitement, really fine line between panic and excitement. Like you can really mistake, physiologically they're the same feelings. It's when you get really excited about something, your heart races and your palms get sweaty when you're really excited. Same thing happens when you're anxious and panicked. So the hardest thing was that I would tell myself that when I'd finished these sessions or when I'd read these really intense stories that I was just so excited because I was helping them, and I was so excited because I was living my life's mission and purpose. It was really hard to have a look at that and go, that's not really excitement, that's chaos. That's fight or flight. It shouldn't feel like that. You should be able to be regulated and guide people. And it was a really big incongruency in that I was telling people that I was healed or that I was, able to heal people, that I was fine when I wasn't fine. When they were telling me their stories or I would be doing the sessions, I would be activated and I would be going into chaos afterwards. So I had to get really honest and be like, okay, actually, I'm probably not as healed as what I said I was. I need to take a break from doing this for 12 months so I can heal myself so that I can come back to it and actually be able to hold it properly. And that's exactly what I did. So the truth that I live by now when it comes to pain and purpose is that pain can guide you to your purpose, but you shouldn't live in that pain. Pain is the catalyst to sometimes help you find the deeper purpose, but you don't live in the pain. At some point, you have to let go of the pain and live in the purpose. You don't necessarily need to hold on to the pain in order to live the purpose. Like you can heal and still live your purpose. Those two things can exist. So what I would say to the woman who only feels alive when she's struggling, when she's in chaos, when she's activated is let's work on your self-awareness. Let's work on noticing how you create that chaos, starting to journal around, where do you create chaos in your life where there doesn't actually need to be any chaos? Where do you create struggle where it actually could be easy? Starting to look into these questions. Again, as well, Trigger to Thriving. Like this is part of the series. We go into where you're creating chaos, why you're creating chaos, where that comes from, what your triggers are. Like it is a literal roadmap from start to finish, from where I was and where you might be to where I am now. It is going through all those stages of, not feeling safe in your body, of going through this struggle of like fight or flight, dissociation, having a dysregulated nervous system, moving you through that into like, who actually are you and who did you believe that you needed to become? Then into this next stage of like, who do you desire to be? Who are you going to step into? What's this new edge we're going to meet? How are we going to just push you a little bit out of your comfort zone so that you can reclaim your power and love and freedom and start to create this life that feels like magic? And then moving into this flow as well, like how to actually exit the self-help world and not need it anymore. Like I'm actually wanting you to get to the point where you don't need to keep learning about yourself and diving in deep. You can actually just enjoy life. So if you are resonating with anything that I've said today, Triggered to Thriving is absolutely going to be so beneficial for you. And it's not just guidance as in, videos. There's a lot of video recordings where I'm teaching you concepts. There's also a lot of journal prompts, there's challenges, there's recorded healings, there's so much in there. It's been very well thought out to take you from where you are to where you need to be. So this is the end of today's episode. I want to thank you for listening if you've made it all the way here to the end. If you know somebody who needs to hear this, please share this episode with them. If you haven't already, subscribe on whichever channel you're listening on, and I will see you on the next episode.